All right, we can move past all the physical therapy nonsense and we can move into the hydration nonsense. So, this week is the start of the new topic for hydration, which pairs well with nutrition. So, just kind of branching out or expanding upon the previous discussions that we've had. So, talking in general this week about hydration, and then we'll get into some of the more specifics. Obviously, everybody loves talking about electrolytes these days. So, we'll talk about electrolytes in the upcoming presentation, and then we'll talk about a couple other different. I don't remember off the top of my head what the other subcategories are, but today we'll just kind of give an overview for what hydration is and kind of the different directions you can go with hydration in terms of health and performance. So for the overview, this is kind of the way that my brain conceptualizes hydration. You can either drink and hydrate for just general everyday health, and you're not necessarily trying to optimize hydration, but you're just trying to get enough, kind of like that baseline or what's adequate for daily living. Or you can try to get to that optimal level where you're trying to truly drink what's going to fuel performance. And so for athletes, this is probably more relevant. Um, but I think both are important because they pair together. Like you can't just hydrate only during your practice and expect to be hydrated the rest of the day. So what you do in your daily life will pair well with what you're doing in your performance. We'll talk about hydration monitoring and the different types of different ways that you can monitor hydration. There's some that are cheap, there's some that are expensive, there's some that are easy, there's some that are time consuming, but there's a bunch of different ways that you can monitor hydration. And then lastly, we'll talk about what to drink. So the differences of which types of beverages you're consuming and what their impact might be on health or performance. So for health, the number one question is how much to drink, and there's a couple of different schools of thought. I mean, the typical 8 cups a day is what is taught in like elementary school to everybody all the way through the school system, but that's a very non-specific and non-individualized approach to hydration. So you're telling an 8-year-old child to drink the same amount of water as a 400-pound adult. So it should be individualized in terms of what you're prescribing. So if you're telling one individual what to drink, it needs to be specific to the individual. So drink when you're thirsty. Everybody gets thirsty at different times. So it's a semi-individualized approach, but at the same time, it's non-specific. It's okay, well, I'm thirsty now. How much should I drink when I'm thirsty? And so it's still non-specific. The easiest way to get to a prescription without getting into like ridiculous conversions of how many milliliters per 15 minutes per pound of body weight per lean mass, whatever else. So the easiest way to remember it is just take your body and divide it in body weight in pounds and divide it by 2, and then that would be your ounces. So for example, if you weigh 200 pounds, you should be aiming to drink somewhere in the ballpark of 100 ounces of water per day. I think this gets skewed as well because the higher you go in your weight, the less accurate this is. I don't think you necessarily need half of it. For example, if you weigh 100 pounds, 50 ounces is probably pretty accurate. But if you weigh 300 pounds, 150 ounces of water is a ton in a day. So trying to get that into an athlete is definitely difficult. So I think it's a good baseline or a good starting point. And then from there, you adjust based on the individual. So if they're drinking way too much and they can't sleep at night because they're trying to drink so much, then that's creating more stress or more harm than it is creating good. The hydration should be helpful, not hurtful. Something that's a really easy fix for this is not necessarily drinking as much water, but eating your fluids. And so this graphic on the right shows some really water dense foods. So these are fruits and vegetables and dairy products that have really high water content. And so you don't necessarily get all of your daily water intake through just drinking water. In fact, a lot of the American diet is getting it from either sports drinks or getting it from soda or coffee or tea, a number of different beverages. So you're probably Andy Galpin has a really good video on this where he's talking about the different sources of fluid throughout the day. And I think it was 50% water, 30% beverages, and 20% food, depending on obviously the individual. And there's some nuance there. Some people are really hydrated from their food. Some people eat really high sodium and really low water content food. So they get a little bit less from their food and probably getting more from beverages or more from water. But The general breakdown is you're getting a lot of it from water, you're getting another big source of it from other beverages, and then you're getting some of it from your food. Questions, comments about that so far?
No questions from me yet.
As I take a sponsored water break, my blue unbranded water.
Electrolytes?
So
You have anything in there?
it's Powerade, but I'm not sponsored by them, so I'm not going to give them the shout out. Actually, in fact, I'm going to give the shout out to Gatorade for making these awesome commercials when we were kids. The got to give a shout out to Caitlin Clark for bringing this back, because the Gatorade commercials where they were all in black and white, but then their sweat was the different color of their drink. Those were so cool when they first came out. Shout out to Gatorade for bringing those back. Those are some of the coolest ads I've ever seen. So for performance, the hydration tactics are a little bit different. You're not necessarily aiming for a daily intake. You're basing it around your training day or your game day. And so the general goal of before training is to start in a hydrated state. So if you start hydrated, and that means you wake up and your urine's clear, you're not thirsty, you haven't lost significant weight overnight, you start there. Once you are hydrated, the goal is then to not lose it. So then when you're in training, the goal is to prevent hypohydration. And so one of the things that I think is helpful for athletes is to drink even when you're not thirsty, especially in cold weather when you really don't feel like drinking much. Still continue to hydrate, because that's when you're going to underhydrate, is when you're not hot and sweaty. I think most athletes do a pretty good job of consuming fluids when they're hot, sweaty, when it's humid out. They'll probably overhydrate on those days because they're feeling so thirsty. But when they don't feel thirsty, when it's really cold out, they're still exercising. They're still using that water for metabolic processes and still getting their sweat in, but they're not feeling as thirsty. So they tend to drink less. And then after, replenish the fluids that are lost. And so one school of thought is that you weigh in pre and post training, and this should be done theoretically, it should be done without any clothes on, but in practice, you're probably in a locker room setting. So minimal clothes is ideal, whether that's shorts only or shorts and a sports bra if you're a woman. The less clothing you can have on, the more accurate it's going to be, because if you sweat into your clothes and then you saturate it, then it's going to look like you've still maintained that weight even though you've sweated out. So less clothes is ideal, but still needs to be practical, especially depending on your individual scenario or setting. High school and collegiate, this can be a lot more difficult. Pro, you can kind of navigate that a little bit easier with separation in locker rooms. But the general gist is you weigh in and then you weigh out whatever you've lost, then you need to replace. And the most nutrition studies will say you're not replacing a 1-to-1. So if you lose a pound, you don't drink a pound. You actually need to consume a little bit more. So this is 1.25 to 1.5 times your weight loss through water should be replaced. So if that's 16 ounces in a pound and you lose 1 pound, you should be consuming 20 to 24 ounces. And this is typically a large water bottle. Most water bottles are 16 ounces. So it would be like a 1.25 to 1.5 standard water bottles. Otherwise, if you have a larger water bottle, this would be a 20-ounce water bottle. Comments, questions about that?
Yeah, so last time we had class, we had talked about using high GI foods or drinks during practice or during competitions.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, do we want to go water before to stay nice and hydrated, then something like Gatorade during, and then water again after?
The goal of the sports drink is twofold, and it depends on the brand of it. So in this same aforementioned Andy Galpin video, he breaks down each drink and each sports drink by brand to then compare and contrast their electrolyte content. So I think he broke down sodium, potassium, magnesium, and then also carbohydrate. And so then in that video, he talks about, okay, well, if you are looking to replace your sodium loss through sweat, then you should be using something much more like this brand. Versus if you're looking to get more carbohydrate out of it, then this brand is terrible and you need to go with this instead. So the general gist for carbohydrate is that you definitely need carbs pre and post, as well as a good replenishment meal for glycogen stores after. So you definitely need carbohydrates pre and during, and then a larger meal for glycogen replenishment post. And so the sports drink, I would probably suggest, there's pros and cons to each, so it's hard to say like definitively like yes you should always drink this before and this during. I would say a blend between water and sports drink during is probably good. The pre, I guess I would lean more towards the sports drink just so that they're getting enough carbs, because athletes tend to underutilize carbs. And then post, I would say there are better drinks, and we'll talk about the different drinks. I think it's the next slide. Maybe it's 2 slides from now. But there's different. The scale that was published was called the Beverage Hydration Index, and so different drinks are going to actually retain water better than water itself. So if you're drinking water, it's considered like a neutral or like the baseline comparison of what's retained by the water. But water actually flushes your system pretty well. You actually excrete a lot of water when you consume water. And so the better way, if you're trying to retain water, which would be considered hydration, is through the use of things like sports drinks or supplements. Different juices can be in that criteria, and then milk is another great one for post.
Got it. Cool. That's helpful. So it really just depends on a case-to-case basis in terms of how we're getting the carbs back and how we're getting that hydration. And maybe it makes more sense to use like a low GI meal before a competition or before practice to start to get some of that breakdown of the carbohydrates, and then a sports drink during, because it's easier to replenish, and then afterwards maybe relying on a combination of the two.
Yeah, I mean, there's different strategies for sure, and like for the general athlete, I think they tend to drink more when it tastes good, so that can be one motivating factor, right? Like if you have the choice between water and nothing, a lot of athletes are just gonna be like, no, I'm fine, I don't need water. But if you get in a scenario where you say water or sports drink, then athletes are gonna say, oh, I want the sports drink. So then they're actually getting more water content than they would if you had only offered water. So it's definitely individualized, but in terms of like practicality, like there's use cases for everything. So you kind of just have to think about what's the goal, what are you trying to achieve, and then based on this goal, what's the best drink formula to achieve this goal. So in a lot of contexts, water is the best option, but in other contexts, there's definitely better options available.
Got it. That's helpful.
So for hydration monitoring, there are, like I said, a number of different ways to measure hydration, and you can either just do this in the comfort of your own home, or you can go out and get this measured. So blood work is the gold standard, and measuring plasma osmolality is the most accurate way of knowing hydration levels. But the step down, or the cheaper alternative, would be urine-specific gravity. So these are machines where typically you're peeing into a cup, you're using a little droplet, and then you're dropping it into a little device that registers how much urine is concentrated within your pee. And so then based on that, it's making a calculation to say whether or not you are hydrated. That is another really accurate way of doing it. It's fairly affordable, but I don't know many people who have a USG device in their own home. Usually that's being measured by some kind of a clinician, whether that's an athletic trainer. I've done it when I worked with wrestling as an AT. Otherwise, I've seen nutritionists, I've seen performance staff do it. It just kind of depends on the setting. The easier way to do it is what Andy Galpin calls the WUT method, W-U-T, and this is really easy to remember because it's like what. But so daily weight is the W, and so you're just tracking your daily weight. If you're losing 3-4 pounds a day, I promise you haven't lost that much in fat. Fat takes a lot longer to see significant weight changes. So if you're having daily fluctuations in weight, it's largely due to hydration. So there are other factors, foods you consume, what you're excreting, as well as water retention, water loss. So those day-to-day changes are probably at least largely contributed by water retention or dehydration. So weight monitoring would be one thing. You wake up every morning, just step on a scale, and then you can see, oh, I'm 2 pounds lighter than I was yesterday. That's probably not great. And then you know that you need to hydrate a little bit more. The urine color is another one that's commonly used, and I like this scale on the right here because it actually says overhydrated. So most coaches are like, you want clear pee, or at least they used to be. I think they're getting a little bit better about that, but it used to be like, drink water until your pee is clear. It's like, that's not great advice. So hyponatremia is a really big kind of phenomena. It's a scary thing. It doesn't happen that often in practice, but it can happen. And when it does happen, it's really bad. So you try not to get to that state by force feeding people water. There's a lot of misconceptions with hydration and cramping. We'll talk more about that at another day. But there's really low correlation with hydration status and cramping. There's not much evidence that would suggest that dehydration causes cramps. There's common misconception, or there's common I guess belief that it is, but there's not much scientific evidence that would point to dehydration causing cramps. So there's a guy out of Texas State, Kevin, I think Miller is his last name, but he has a presentation and he's got a lot of different publications that he basically breaks down all the myths of hydration and supplements and all of those things. And his thing is, if we tell people that dehydration is causing their cramping, then they rehydrate and they chug a gallon of water and they still cramp. Okay, now what? So they're definitely hydrated because they drank a gallon of water every day for a week and they're still cramping. Okay, guess what? More water. And you just get this positive feedback loop where, oh, still cramping, drink more water. And eventually they get to the point where they're chugging 3 gallons of water a day and they're literally just waterlogging themselves. And that's how you can create hyponatremia. So his belief is that you should never tell somebody that cramps are caused by dehydration because it creates that reinforcement and that belief, oh, I'm still cramping even though I drank this much water. That means I didn't drink enough. So education is a big piece of it. But again, I like this chart because it shows a good or a fair range, and then it starts to show those dehydrated. I think that one on the right is probably not severe dehydrated. That's probably some kind of a kidney failure, but usually it becomes a darker brown as opposed to a red. But where was I? So, okay, so that was the U. So that urine color is an easy way to track hydration status. From there, you get W, U, and T. So thirst is another really good perception of dehydration. So if you're thirsty, you're probably dehydrated. This works less well while you're training because you probably won't perceive that you are thirsty until it's far too late. But while you're just sitting around throughout the day, if you're thirsty, you're probably dehydrated. That's a pretty good sign. So you can use those 3 letters to monitor your hydration throughout the course of the day. If you want to get it truly and like quantitatively defined, you can go get blood work, or you can get a urine-specific USG device, and then you can measure those things. But for most people who just want a simple like daily monitor, go with the what method. Comments, questions there?
No questions for me. Your mic was cutting out a little bit on that slide.
Uh-oh, did everything at least make sense?
Everything made sense. It just sounded a little robotic.
All right, hopefully that knocks it off, and hopefully we can not sound robotic going forward.
It sounds much better now.
Cool. So for what to drink, and this was going to your question earlier, it depends on what you're trying to achieve. So this is specifically for fluid retention. And this is dependent on the timeline. So this is after 2 hours is on this chart, but the study actually looked at 2 hours and 4 hours post. So if you're already hydrated, the best way to retain water is through that oral rehydration solution. And typically what this is referring to is things like Pedialyte or some kind of like an electrolyte supplement. Then the next most water retention comes from skimmed milk, whole milk, orange juice. And you can see all of these things that retain water actually better than still water. So you get cola, diet cola, cold tea, hot tea, and then finally you get to still water. The only things that are less hydrating than still water: sparkling water, sports drink, lager, and coffee. And I will stay on this soapbox all day, every day. Coffee is not dehydrating. Coffee is just slightly less hydrating than water. And it depends largely on the coffee you drink. If you are drinking an Americano and you get some kind of a coffee mixed with water, you probably have enough water content to offset the fluid loss from the caffeine. If you're drinking straight espresso, probably not, because you've got a really dense caffeine source with not a lot of water to supplement it. But most people are drinking larger volumes of coffee that have low enough caffeine content that you're not going to get dehydrated from them. So that's my soapbox, my rant for the day. Coffee does not cause dehydration. Another common misconception. There's a lot of misconceptions about hydration. The other thing that to consider in your decision of what to drink, and we talked about this earlier, was the carbohydrate content. So carbs post training are probably not as important to have those the rapid digestion as opposed to like during training when you're actually trying to utilize those carbs. So you can have slower digesting carbs post training, but the carb content is definitely important. So if you're trying to, let's say you're just sitting around for the day, you're not exercising at all, you don't necessarily need as many carbs. So maybe you want to go for something low calorie or low carb, and you're going to go for that oral rehydration solution because it's got less calories than milk, it's got less than orange juice, cola. Maybe you go for a diet cola because you want the flavor, and then it's still more hydrating than water, but you're not getting those carbs. Or if you are really active that day and you want the calories, milk would do a great job because milk has a lot of fat content, or even skim milk, which has a lot of carb content to replace the fat that's been removed. And then you get a lot of the energy and calories from those two drinks. Orange juice would be another great option. Cola would be a great option. But then all the way down at the bottom, sports drink is actually less hydrating in some contexts than still water. So this graph is a really good visualization of the likelihood that it's going to retain water, which would be the quote definition of hydration. Any questions, comments about that?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I think myself included, and a lot of people think of water as like the gold standard when it comes to being hydrated. But I would never think that something like milk or even orange juice can actually hydrate you even better than that. So the first one there is that's like Pedialyte, or even if you get like a dry packet of electrolytes and just put it in your water, same kind of idea.
Correct. Yeah, these are going to be like an intentionally mixed electrolyte solution. So this is usually, I think, in this exact study, I think it was Pedialyte was the brand name. But typically, this can be things like electrolyte tablets that you're dropping into a water bottle, or you can have like a salt mix, like those salt packets that you mix in. That would be something like this.
Cool.
And typically those kinds of drinks are super high in sodium content. Like we're talking about like 1,000+ milligrams of sodium. I mean, I've seen some as high as I think 2 grams of sodium.
Which in some contexts is a good thing, and in other contexts is a bad thing, depending on the individual.
Right. Like if you look at the daily consumption of sodium for the average American, they're probably eating like 6 grams, like 6,000 milligrams of sodium in the day. Like you don't need more sodium if you're eating the typical American diet. But if you're outside all day and you're eating an otherwise healthy diet where you're getting lots of water dense foods, and you're not getting a ton of sodium through your diet, then yeah, maybe you need a little bit more sodium to help retain some of that water.
Right, makes sense.
So for the literature review for this week, there's a really the website My Sports Science put out the publication with that chart that I just showed on the last slide, with a kind of blog style publication that's on it, and it breaks down basically the paper and the science behind why those drinks are retaining more water. Second one, there's a PDF that was put out by the NATA, National Athletic Trainers Association, called the Sports Hydration Guidelines. And it's just a really short, I think it's 1 page, maybe it's 2 pages, PDF on instructions for timeline of hydration and different quantities and volumes and what you should be consuming pre and post. For the media side of things, Andy Galpin, that 3 steps to optimizing hydration video, he's got a few in a series where he basically breaks down the physiology of hydration and talks about like why hydration works. And then also he talks about the practical side of things, what you should drink and when, and then also how you can monitor hydration in a little bit more detail than what I gave. So that is probably the best video of all of them this week. Highly suggest you check that video out. The Institute of Human Anatomy has a video. Their videos are actually like really underrated. There's not too many views on these, but they break down like the anatomy and the physiology of how hydration works. So that video gets a little bit more deep in like the exercise physiology and the anatomy. So if you're interested in the science, definitely check that out. But if you just want like more of the practical, like tell me what to drink and when, then go more for the Andy Galpin one. And then lastly, my friend Brett Singer has a video that surprised me because it was 8 years old, but it sounds like it was from yesterday. The advice was still pretty good. And so he's got a video, it's like 1.5 minutes, but it's pretty good. Practical suggestions for sports nutrition and creating good hydration habits. One of the things that he talked about that I remember from that video was talking about carrying a water bottle with you and just always having easy access to water is a easy step for better hydration habits. The publication review for this week. So this is the paper that they reference in that chart. And so the publication itself was a randomized control trial with 72 male participants. I don't know why it was only male, but they were looking at male semi-active participants where these people were going out and recreational athletes or just fitness enthusiasts. So they were at least pretty active on a weekly basis. And they monitored the effects of the drinks that they were consuming. They were already hydrated going into this. So again, this could be a different outcome if you're looking at dehydrated subjects. But for people who are already hydrated, the comparison of the water retention happened through urine excretion. So they were comparing the volume of urine that was being excreted pre and post, and they saw that different drinks were either causing more water to be excreted or less water to be excreted, meaning that it was being retained. So for the findings, the paper found that the total urine mass was decreased for the following drinks: oral rehydration solution, full fat milk, and skimmed milk. And so that means, again, if the total urine mass decreases, that means more urine or more fluid is being retained. And so then that means that they're being more hydrated because their body's actually using that water as opposed to just excreting it. On the other side, total urine mass was not different for cola, diet cola, hot tea, iced tea, coffee, lager, orange juice, sparkling water, and sports drink. And again, this is statistically significant. So it's not necessarily that it wasn't different, it's that it wasn't statistically different in their finding. This chart at the bottom I included for comparison of the different considerations when you're choosing a drink. And so for the let's just say for carbohydrate content, if you want something that's really dense in carbs, cola is a great option. Orange juice is a great option. So if you're trying to do those, again, if you're going for a longer endurance event and you want those carbs, maybe you consider those drinks pre or during. Milk seems to be pretty good in general for hydration, but at the same time, like, who wants to drink milk during a long endurance event? Not me. I think I would throw it up immediately. So milk isn't really a practical option. It's better for post-training rehydration. But some of those options would be better than just still water. So you could do something like an oral rehydration solution, or you could do sports drink would be a good option if you're still, again, looking for a little bit more electrolyte content plus the carbs. If you're looking for something high in sodium to help you then retain the water, looking at this chart, the oral rehydration solution is way higher in content, but then also the sports drink would be semi high. The potassium is pretty high in orange juice, but also high in the oral rehydration solution, also high in milk. So, depending on what you're after, if you're looking for things with caffeine, obviously you could look down at the bottom there and you would see coffee has the highest caffeine content out of all of them. But again, there's water content in the coffee, so it's offsetting some of those caffeine losses. Tea, both hot and cold, has high caffeine content. So if you're looking for a drink, maybe you're doing a pre-game drink and you want to have something high in caffeine to kind of get yourself fired up, those would be some options. The Diet Cola and regular cola have some caffeine, so those would be another option. I think the tricky thing with Diet Cola and cola is that you're going to have carbonation, so that can cause GI discomfort in some individuals. So for some people, drinking cola pre-game would be no problem. You get carbs, plus you get caffeine, plus you get it tastes good, plus you get water content. That would be a great option for some people. For others, if it causes you some bloating, some discomfort, or you're out there burping up a storm on the field, then you can't perform. So individual considerations there, but it would be one option. And then lastly, the protein. If you're looking for something post, again, remember we're talking about the post anabolic window with nutrient timing, and you're looking at things with either protein or carbs to then kind of restore and recover from that training session, then the either full fat milk or skimmed milk would be a great option because you get carbs, you get protein, and you get the water content. Comments, questions about the findings?
No real questions for me. I just think it's pretty interesting and it's pretty cool to see, the different options you have based on what your goals are and based on what your individual preferences are too.
Yeah, for sure. Individual preference matters. Like if I tell you coffee is the best thing in the world and you don't like coffee, well, that's not really a great option for you. So same thing goes for any of these. If you say Coca-Cola is a great option and they're like, no, I'm very natural, I don't want to drink any of that manufactured stuff, then okay, that doesn't work for you. So you got to find the right option for the individual. A lot of hydration comes down to individual needs and preferences.
Awesome.
That will wrap it up for this week. So again, the way that I think about it is there's health, hydration, just your daily habits. Then there's hydration for performance and trying to optimize performance. And then there is hydration monitoring. And then there's one more that I forgot to add on there, which is the different options that they have available to them for the hydration. So keeping those things in mind as you're making these suggestions to athletes. That will wrap us up for this week. Next week, we'll get into the nitty gritty of electrolytes, and I'll highlight some of Kevin Miller's stuff. He's got some really good, basically trash talk where he says, if you were going to drink Gatorade to try to replace the electrolyte loss from a tennis match, you would need, I can't remember the number off the top of my head. I think it was like 24 or 26, something like that, liters of Gatorade. It's like, who's drinking that much to replace electrolytes? Nobody. So, electrolytes are an interesting hot topic, but we'll get into the details on that on Thursday.
So long story short, you need something more than Gatorade to replenish electrolytes.
For sure. Like if you think electrolytes are the cause of whatever cramps or lack of performance, if you think that's the issue, then yeah, Gatorade's not going to cut it. Element is probably the best in terms of electrolyte content, or Pedialyte would be another great option. But even those really pale in comparison to how much electrolyte is really lost in this long, hot, sweaty, humid tennis match.
Cool. Looking forward to it.
All right. Take it easy. See you next time.